I'd just clocked out, wiped the grease off my hands, and headed home, tired from a long day of turning wrenches and making things run smooth again. That was my life, simple, predictable, quiet. But as I walked through the door, everything changed in an instant. There she was, Sarah, sitting on the couch, laughing. Not with me, but with him, Greg. My blood went cold. He was leaning back, kicking his muddy boots up on the coffee table I'd spent weeks sanding and staining. The same coffee table I'd made with my own hands piece by piece, for the life we'd built together. I don't know what I was expecting, but it sure wasn't this. Sarah looked up at me, eyes a little too wide, a little too amused. "What's going on here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She shrugged like it was no big deal. "It's over, Nathan. No divorce papers, no need to talk about it. Just leave." I felt the weight of her words hit me harder than anything I'd ever felt before. Over. Like that. Like the years I'd spent supporting her, fixing up the house, never asking for anything in return, never complaining. It didn't matter. None of it mattered. I stood there for a beat, trying to make sense of what was happening, but all I could do was stare at Greg, who was grinning like he owned the place. He didn't even have the decency to take his boots off. I felt that deep in my gut, like an insult to everything I'd worked for. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I packed a bag, quiet as hell. I didn't even look at Sarah again. She didn't deserve my attention. I walked out without making a scene, but the weight of it all pressed down on me the second I stepped out the door. My life had just unraveled in seconds. I got in my truck, slammed the door, and drove away. The wheels on the road hummed under me, but it was like they were carrying me away from everything I thought I knew. I didn't stop driving until the city lights were nothing but a blur in the rearview mirror. The road stretched ahead of me, dark and quiet, with only the hum of the engine for company. My hands gripped the steering wheel tight, but my mind was elsewhere. On Sarah, on the mess I'd just walked away from. The cabin sat at the edge of nowhere, hidden by trees, miles from the nearest road or neighbor. I only came out here when I needed to be alone, when I needed to think. I parked the truck, turned off the engine, and sat there for a minute, letting the silence settle in around me. I used to think I came out here to escape the noise of life, but tonight, the silence was just as loud. I grabbed my duffel bag and started unpacking my life into the small cabin. It was the kind of place that smelled like pine and earth, like nothing had ever been touched. It was perfect. I could breathe out here. But as I set my stuff down on the old wooden table, the memories of Sarah crept in. She never questioned me, never cared enough to ask. All those late nights, all those business trips I told her about. She never wondered where I was or what I was really doing. To her, I was just the guy who fixed things. She thought I worked for some run-of-the-mill construction company, simple, straightforward, no questions. It was easier that way. She didn't know the truth, and honestly, I never gave her a reason to. But damn, those lies had piled up, one after another, and I wasn't sure who I was anymore. The guy who spent years working 2 jobs, breaking my back for her, and the life we had. Or the man who'd been living a secret life all along. I could still hear her voice in my head, the way she'd dismiss me when I tried to explain things to her. She'd say, "You're always so serious, Nathan. Just relax. Why can't you be more like Greg?" Greg? I could feel the heat rise in my chest. She had no idea what kind of man he really was. She had no idea what she was throwing away to be with him. But I couldn't get stuck on that. Not now. I shoved those thoughts aside and pulled my phone out of my pocket. There was a message waiting for me. Nothing out of the ordinary, just confirmation that the mission was set to begin tomorrow. The contact was marked Command, someone I'd been working with for a while, the kind of person I didn't question. I was good at my job, and it was time to get back to it. I shot a quick reply, confirming the details, then put my phone down. Tomorrow would bring its own set of challenges, but they were easier to face than the mess I'd just left behind. I moved through the cabin, setting up my gear. The weight of the bag felt different now, like it carried more than just my clothes and tools. It carried everything, the lies, the choices, the things I'd hidden from her. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just walking away from Sarah. I was walking away from all of it. The fake life we'd built, the versions of myself I'd pretended to be just to keep the peace. The man Sarah thought she knew, he didn't exist. He was just a ghost I'd created to fit into her world. And I had to let him go, Tonight, I wasn't Nathan the mechanic. Tonight, I was Nathan the operative. Tomorrow, I'd be someone else entirely. I closed the suitcase, zipped it up tight, and took a deep breath. Whatever happened next, I wasn't turning back. I woke up early the next morning, the weight of what I was about to do hanging heavy in the air. I didn't need to check the clock to know it was time. I already had my gear packed and ready to go, everything in place. But there was one thing left to do before I left the cabin. I pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and found the message from command. It was brief. Everything was set. The teams were in position. The operation would go live at 9 a.m. sharp. I exhaled, and for the first time in a long while, I let the tension in my chest ease just a little. This wasn't just another mission. This was personal. Greg. He wasn't just Sarah's new boyfriend. I'd been tracking him for months, and what I'd learned about him made my stomach turn. He was more than some random guy who decided to play house with her. He was knee-deep in financial fraud, money laundering, and worse. His network ran deep, all the way to people who'd make your skin crawl if you knew the full extent of it. It wasn't just about putting a stop to him. It was about protecting people who had no idea how deep into the dirt he was. People like Sarah, who thought she could just skip through life with a smile on her face, never knowing the truth about the man she'd fallen for. I started the truck and pulled out of the cabin's gravel drive, the tires crunching beneath me as I hit the main road. It was still dark outside, the sky barely starting to lighten. The city was a long drive, but I didn't mind the solitude. The road ahead was straight, and I could let my mind wander for a bit, but I couldn't afford to get distracted. Sarah's face kept flashing in front of me. That laugh she shared with Greg, the way she looked at him like he was the answer to everything. I hated it, but I shoved it down, buried it deep. I couldn't let her get to me now. Not now. This wasn't about her anymore. The team was waiting for me at the rendezvous point, an old, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It was the perfect place to meet up before the operation. Nobody would think to look for us there, and the place had enough space for all the vehicles and equipment we needed. By the time I pulled up, the sun was just beginning to rise, casting a dull light over the warehouse's cracked walls. I parked, stepped out of the truck, and immediately felt the weight of the job settle back into my bones. I made my way inside, where the rest of the team was gathered. They were all business, already going over the plan one last time, checking their gear, getting their heads in the right place. "Everything's set," my contact, Reed, said when he saw me. He was a steady guy, never rattled, no matter what the situation. His eyes locked onto mine, and I nodded. No words were needed. We moved into position, gathering around the table in the center of the warehouse, where maps and intel were laid out. I took a deep breath, running through the final details in my head. The plan was straightforward, but nothing ever went exactly as planned. We'd have to stay sharp. "Greg's expecting a meeting this morning," Reed said, pointing to the screen. "We're moving in at 9 o'clock. The house is our target. We take him down there, but be careful. There's a lot of collateral damage potential if we don't handle this right." My mind was sharp, but I felt the edge of impatience gnawing at me. The plan was solid, and the team was ready, but the clock was ticking, and I needed this to be over with. I needed this to be done. I glanced around the room at the faces of the men and women who'd been training for months for this very moment. It wasn't just about taking down Greg. It was about taking down everything he stood for. His network, his lies. The same lies I'd been living in my own life. The ones I was finally walking away from. As the minutes counted down, the reality of what was coming began to settle in. This wasn't just another mission. This was a clean break, and I wasn't looking back. The tension in the air was thick as we moved into position. I could feel it in my chest, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Every detail had been accounted for. We were ready. But as the minutes ticked down to 9 a.m., something in me shifted, a tight knot of anticipation pulling my insides taut. I stood off to the side of the warehouse, my back against a concrete pillar, my eyes glued to the live feed in front of me. The small cameras we had planted around Greg's house were transmitting everything in real time. Every moment that passed felt like a countdown, a moment closer to everything coming apart. Through the grainy footage, I saw Sarah. She was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee, completely unaware that her world was about to shatter. She looked calm, even a little too comfortable, like she had no idea what was coming. Then, the door of the house burst open, and agents flooded in, their heavy boots pounding the hardwood floor. I watched through the cameras as they swarmed Greg, who was caught off guard, his hands raised in the air before he was slammed against the wall. His face twisted in anger, but there was nothing he could do. The handcuffs were on him before he even had time to react. The agents quickly moved to gather evidence, pulling out documents, computers, and files from hidden drawers. Everything they needed to tie him to the fraud, the money laundering, the whole illegal empire he'd built. I could feel my pulse quicken as I watched it all unfold. This was it, the takedown, the end of it all. But then the camera swung around to Sarah, and for a second I felt a pang of something. Guilt, maybe. No, I shoved it down. She had no place in my thoughts now. Her face was a mask of confusion. She stood up, eyes wide, her hands trembling as she looked between Greg and the agents. Her voice, high and shaky, cut through the feed. "What's going on? What's happening?" I watched her stumble backward, her breath shallow, the panic creeping in. She had no idea, did she? She didn't know what Greg had been involved in. She didn't know how deep he was in. And that realization hit me harder than I expected. She was still caught in her dream, the one she'd built with him, thinking it was all real, all safe. I'd known she was naive. Hell, I'd known she never cared to ask the right questions, but this. Watching her unravel in real time, watching the cruelty from our last encounter fade into desperation. It was different. I hadn't expected to feel anything for her, but seeing her like this made something inside me twist. An agent moved in on her, guiding her away from the kitchen. She was still pleading, still trying to make sense of it all. I didn't know, I swear. I didn't know what he was doing. She was shaking her head now, her voice cracking, the calm front completely gone. I wanted to look away. I should have looked away, but I didn't. I couldn't. As the agents led her down the hallway toward the front door, her eyes met the camera feed for just a second. I don't know why, but I felt like she was looking right at me. For a brief moment, I saw something in her. Regret, fear, maybe a little guilt. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't anywhere near enough to make up for what she'd done. The door slammed open, and they shoved Greg out first, his face contorted with rage, his hands cuffed behind him. Then they led Sarah out, her face pale, her eyes darting around like she couldn't quite comprehend what was happening. She looked like a different person, lost, broken. I stayed quiet, watching them through the feed. The operation was a success. Greg was done. He was going away for a long time, and there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it. But as I watched Sarah disappear from the frame, the strange feeling of closure I thought I'd get didn't come. Instead, I felt nothing. And maybe that was worse. The work was done. Greg was caught. But there was no satisfaction, no victory lap, just emptiness. The screen flickered and I turned away. This wasn't my fight anymore. It hadn't been for a while. I knew that now. The safe house was quiet, too quiet. It was one of those places that didn't feel like it was ever meant to be lived in. Bare walls, faded carpet, a single cracked window that let in just enough light to remind you there was still a world outside. But inside, all I could hear was the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead and the soft click of my pen as I ran through the evidence again. Greg was tangled in a mess of financial fraud, money laundering, and who knew what else. The files in front of me didn't leave any room for doubt. He was done. The investigation had enough to put him away for good. But even as I read through it, my mind kept drifting back to Sarah. I hadn't expected to feel anything for her after all this. But seeing her face on the live feed, lost and confused, had stirred something up in me that I wasn't ready to confront. She had always brushed off my work, never once asking about what I did, how I made it all happen. To her, I was just the steady, dependable guy who fixed things, who kept everything running smoothly, never asking for anything in return. But I'd given her everything, my time, my energy, my loyalty. I'd built that life for her, for us. And she'd thrown it all away for someone like Greg, someone who'd never had to work for a damn thing in his life, who was willing to use her to get what he wanted. It ate at me, that realization. I leaned back in the chair and let out a breath, my fingers tapping against the desk. I'd spent years living in her shadow, trying to make her happy, making sacrifices I never asked to make. I'd hidden parts of myself, buried things I'd rather not face, all because I thought that's what you did for the people you loved. But when I really thought about it, what had I gotten in return? A woman who didn't know me, A woman who never cared to look beyond the surface. A woman who found someone else when she got bored of me. I stared at the screen, the image of Sarah's face still fresh in my mind, but it felt different now. The pity I'd felt before was gone, replaced with something colder. She didn't deserve my sympathy. She'd made her choices, and now she was reaping the consequences. I'd spent enough time thinking about her, enough time wondering if I'd done the right thing. But the truth was, I had. I had done everything for the right reasons. I had worked hard for her, for us. And in the end, I wasn't the one who betrayed everything. I grabbed the phone sitting beside me and flipped through the latest updates on the investigation. Greg's connections were wider than we'd first realized, and it was clear now that the cleanup would take months, maybe longer, but it didn't matter. My part was done. I'd pulled the trigger, and the operation had gone off without a hitch. Still, something gnawed at me, some part of me that wasn't satisfied with the way it all had ended. I should feel relief, maybe even pride in the work we'd done, but instead, I just felt empty. I'd gotten what I wanted, but I wasn't sure I liked how it felt. There was a knock at the door, sharp and sudden. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I didn't move right away. I didn't need to. This wasn't my first time in a safe house. I didn't feel the need to hurry or hide. I already knew it was just another update on the case, another report. I could almost hear the voice in my head. Mission accomplished. But no matter how many times I ran through the motions, it didn't change the fact that Sarah's world had fallen apart because of her own choices, and because of mine. I stood up, shoved the evidence aside, and walked toward the door, my mind still spinning. The work wasn't done. The takedown was only the beginning. But I wasn't about to dwell on Sarah anymore. I couldn't afford to. She had her consequences. I had mine. The debriefing at FBI headquarters was everything I expected. Sterile, fast-paced, and full of people talking shop. I barely paid attention as Reed and the others went over the final details of the operation. It was already a done deal. Greg was caught. His connections were cut. And now we were picking up the pieces, making sure every trail was followed. The team went through the motions, ticking off boxes, discussing strategy for the next phase of the operation. But my mind kept drifting, not to the case at hand, but to Sarah. Greg was trying to downplay his involvement in everything. It was no surprise. When you're caught with your hands covered in someone else's blood, you'll lie, deny, and claim innocence until the very end. The evidence was there, though, irrefutable. Money trails, offshore accounts, fraudulent transactions. Nothing he could say would change what we had on him. Still, part of me couldn't shake the nagging thought that he wasn't the only one caught in this mess. I couldn't stop thinking about Sarah. She hadn't been involved in the way Greg had, but she'd still played a part, a big part. Her ignorance didn't change that she'd been part of his world, a world built on lies. Maybe she didn't know the full extent of his criminal dealings, but she had to have seen something off about him. The late nights, the strange phone calls. She was still in the wind, being questioned and processed, but I couldn't get her out of my head. And as much as I tried to shove it away, guilt gnawed at me. She hadn't known everything. Hell, she probably hadn't even known most of it, but she'd turned a blind eye to the signs. And even if it was just a part of her ignorance, I was still tied to her in a way I couldn't ignore. I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake it off, when an agent handed me a phone. "Your lawyer's on the line. Says it's important." I frowned, hesitating before taking the phone. "Thanks." I put it to my ear. "Yeah." "Nathan?" My lawyer's voice came through, calm, but with an edge of urgency. "Sarah wants to meet with you. She's asking to speak with you directly." A tight knot twisted in my stomach. I hadn't expected that. I'd thought she'd want to keep her distance, especially after everything. But a part of me, a small part I hated admitting, wondered what she had to say, what she wanted after all this. "Why?" I asked, my voice flat, trying to keep the emotions in check. She didn't go into specifics. She just wants to talk. She's requesting a face-to-face. I let out a breath, running my hand through my hair. Part of me said I should keep my distance, that this was just another manipulation, another attempt to get me to feel something for her when she'd never cared before. But another part of me, the part that still remembered our years together, was curious. What was left to say? What did she think she could fix now? "Fine," I said finally. "Set it up. I'll hear her out." "All right," my lawyer said, sounding a bit relieved. "I'll let her know." I'll be there with you, just in case. But you should be prepared. She's fragile right now. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about Greg or her involvement in the mess. This was something deeper, something that had nothing to do with the takedown. I hung up the phone and looked out the window, the weight of the situation pressing on me. Was this just curiosity, or was I setting myself up for something I'd regret? Either way, I needed closure. Maybe this meeting, whatever it was, would finally give me that. Or maybe it would leave me with even more questions. I walked into the FBI building with a tight knot in my stomach, the cold air inside doing little to calm the fire burning in my chest. They led me down a long corridor, the fluorescent lights buzzing above us, the quiet hum of the place making everything feel too real. When they opened the door to the holding cell, Sarah was sitting on the bench, her hands folded in her lap, looking like a stranger. Her hair was a mess, her eyes dull and red-rimmed, like she hadn't slept in days. The woman I used to know, the one who used to smile at me like everything was okay, was gone. All that was left was this broken version of her, staring up at me with a look of desperation. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice shaky. I didn't know. I didn't know what he was really doing. I swear." I stood there, watching her for a beat, my body frozen. I wanted to walk out. I didn't want to hear any of this, but I couldn't move. Not yet. I needed to hear it from her, whatever she thought she had left to say. She scrambled to her feet, eyes wide, pleading. "I never understood you, Nathan. I never understood what you sacrificed, what you did for us. I was so focused on the life I thought I wanted. I didn't see you, not really." My jaw tightened. I heard every word, but they didn't mean a thing to me anymore. She was crying now, her voice cracking as she reached out. "I was wrong. I know I was. I'm so sorry. But please, you have to believe me. I didn't know what Greg was really about. He lied to me." I took a step forward, my voice calm but cold. "You didn't care to know, Sarah. You never cared enough to ask. You were too caught up in your perfect little world with him, living the dream you thought you deserved. You didn't care what I did, how hard I worked for us. You never asked because it was easier not to." She flinched like I'd slapped her. Her face crumpled and she shook her head as if trying to deny what I just said. But I saw it in her eyes. She knew. She knew exactly what I was talking about. "You don't get it," she whispered, pleading now. "Greg played me for a fool. I was just trying to make things work, to be happy. But he's not who I thought he was, Nathan. I never saw it. I swear." I felt a cold wave of anger rise in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. "You chose to ignore the signs, Sarah. It wasn't just Greg, it was everything. You pushed me aside, took me for granted while you chased something else. And now you're here, asking me to clean up your mess, to fix it." She took a step toward me, her eyes wide with fear. "Please, Nathan. Please, I don't know what to do. Can you help me? Please just help me out of this. I shook my head slowly, not letting her finish. "No, you don't get to pull me back in now. You made your choices, and now you're going to face the consequences." My voice was firm, steady, no hesitation. "I'm done. I'm not part of your world anymore. Not after everything." She looked at me, her face crumbling under the weight of my words, like she couldn't believe what I was saying, like she thought she could still twist me back into the person I used to be for her. But I wasn't that guy anymore. Her hands dropped to her sides, her shoulders slumping as the realization hit her. She didn't say anything else. She just stood there, broken. I didn't want to see her like this. But there was nothing left for me to give. I had done everything for her, for us, and she had walked away, piece by piece. I couldn't keep pretending, not anymore. As I turned to walk away, I could hear her soft sobs behind me, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. It was over, and no matter how much she begged, I knew now that there was no going back. I left Sarah behind in that holding cell and drove straight back to the FBI warehouse. The operation was over. It had gone according to plan, but somehow it felt like everything else had stopped moving. I walked in, and the team was gathered around, slapping each other on the back, exchanging congratulations. I wasn't in the mood for any of it. Reed walked up to me, a serious look on his face. "Nathan, Greg's done. New evidence just came in, tied him directly to the offshore accounts, the money laundering, everything. This guy's going away for a long time." I nodded, but I didn't feel a rush of relief or victory like I thought I would. It should have felt like a win. I'd done my job. I'd taken down the guy who had been messing with my life, with Sarah's life. But all I felt was a deep sense of exhaustion, a kind of numbness that wouldn't go away. The rest of the team was still celebrating, but I couldn't bring myself to join in. I was done. Done with all of it, done with the lies, done with the mess. I'd done everything I set out to do, but I wasn't sure it had been worth it. I went to my truck and sat there for a while, staring at nothing. The cool air outside didn't help. I just needed a moment to breathe, to let the noise in my head quiet down. That's when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out without thinking. It was a text from Sarah. "Can you come visit me? I need to talk." I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the keys. Part of me, just a small part, wanted to reply. Maybe because I thought I owed her something. Maybe because I was still hoping for some closure, some sense of understanding that would make all of this make sense. But I knew better. I'd heard everything I needed to hear, and no matter how many times she asked, I couldn't keep going back. I deleted the message without responding. I didn't want to be that person anymore. The person who kept going back to a life that was never really mine. I was tired of pretending I could fix things, tired of carrying all the weight of someone else's mistakes. The drive home was quiet. The streets were empty, the world still asleep. My small apartment felt just as quiet when I walked in. Everything was exactly where I'd left it, simple, unremarkable. It should have felt like peace, but instead, there was just a hollow space where something used to be. I took a deep breath and sat down on the couch, the weight of it all pressing down on me. The quiet wasn't comforting. It was like the silence was echoing back everything I'd lost, the life I thought I'd have, the woman I thought I knew. But for the first time, I knew it was all gone. There was no pretending, no more trying to fix things that couldn't be fixed. I sat there for a while, staring at the walls, feeling the emptiness settle in around me. But it was different now. The weight didn't feel like a burden. It just was. And I was okay with that. The days that followed felt different, like the weight of everything had been lifted off my shoulders. The promotion came through just a few weeks after everything with Greg and Sarah settled, and suddenly I was in charge of leading covert operations for the FBI. It was the kind of role I'd always dreamed about, the kind of responsibility I'd worked for without ever expecting it. I spent my days at the office now, surrounded by a team I actually respected, doing work that mattered. No more pretending, no more hiding pieces of myself or the job I really did. I reviewed cases, checked in with agents on the field, and made decisions that carried weight. It felt good to be in charge, to finally feel like I was in the right place. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, wondering if I was wasting my time. There were no more distractions. No more wondering if I should have done something differently. No more pretending like I could fix a broken life that wasn't mine to fix. The job was clear. The mission was simple. As I sat at my desk one morning, going over the latest intel, my phone buzzed. Another message from Sarah. It wasn't the first one. I'd gotten a few texts since our last meeting, all asking if we could talk. I hadn't responded to any of them, not one. This time, I didn't even look at it. I didn't need to. The decision had been made, and the chapter was closed. I had nothing left to say to her. She was no longer part of my world. I turned the phone face down and focused on the work in front of me. A few months ago, this office, this job, would have felt like a dream I was too afraid to reach for. But now, it felt like the only thing that mattered. I was in control. I wasn't looking back. The past was gone, and the future was wide open. I left the office that evening with a new sense of purpose. The city outside was quiet, the streets empty except for the occasional car passing by. It was a long drive back to my apartment, but it didn't matter. I felt like I was moving forward for the first time in a long time. The apartment was just as I'd left it. Small, plain, but now it felt like home. No more ghosts of a past I couldn't change. No more false promises. It was just me, the job, and the road ahead. The emptiness I'd felt before was gone. The weight had been replaced with clarity. I didn't need anyone else to feel whole. I was exactly where I needed to be. I closed the door behind me, the click of the lock echoing in the silence, and for the first time in a long time, I knew that nothing would pull me off course. I wasn't looking back anymore, only forward.